Hi, HIStalk. This is Katie the Intern with our first virtual audio-video interview. Thanks so much for being here. Today we've got Dr. Rafid Fadul. He is Director of Pulmonology at Blanchard Valley Health and also Executive Medical Officer at Wheel. So thank you so much, Dr. Fadul, for being here. Let's kind of just start off with you telling us, why did you become a physician and what drove you to pulmonology?
Yeah, sure. So I can trace it back to the exact moment. Actually, I was actually an economics major in undergraduate, and I was in a public health course, and was getting in this really heated debate with the professor. We're standing up and shouting at each other. This is my senior year. I'm like ready to graduate, and he's like, "Mr. Fadul, you have to sit down. Economics is about efficiency, not equity." And he was totally right, obviously, right? But at that point, I kind of just sunk in my head. I'm like, well, maybe this is, I love economics, but maybe this is not necessarily exactly what I want to do. And that put me down the road to start thinking about medicine. And, the rest was history after that. In terms of pulmonary critical care, that to me was, I wanted to stay in a field that had breadth, right? So critical care, you see everything. Anyone who comes to my ICU is they're at risk of dying from a variety of different things. So I'm not just kind of focused on one narrow space. So to me that was important, and also it's just it's a very kind of intimate setting, right? I jokingly refer to it as like the kind of like the weekend relationship, right? Where you're there and you have this intense period for several days with these families, and they let you into their lives, and it's a very humbling and humbling experience to be able to provide care for these people and be there for them when they're at their most vulnerable. So for me, I really enjoyed the intensity of those relationships, and kind of the high stakes game that you play with providing that kind of care. And I still practice to this day, and I don't think I'll ever probably stop practicing. It's that meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. That's great to hear. So you're Director of Blanchard Valley Health, but you also are Executive Medical Officer at Wheel. So tell us, what is Wheel? What does it do? How long has it been a business?
Yeah, Wheel started a few years ago in 2017. We really started kind of moving forward and getting traction in 2018, 2019. Wheel is basically the kind of digital health infrastructure company. So the analogy I give to people is, if this is the gold rush in the 1840s, we're the guys selling shovels, right? So what we do is we provide the infrastructure for companies that are either startups all the way up to publicly traded, large enterprise clients, health systems, pharma, you name it, that have interest or are already in the digital health space. We give them the tools that are necessary for them to establish or expand their footprint and improve access to care for patients all over the country.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So as Executive Medical Officer, what do you do at Wheel?
So my purview is really looking at all things kind of patient and quality related. So when we have a new client that comes into the space, I'll meet these clients. We'll evaluate their patient journey, look at their provider journey as well. Making sure that we've kind of evaluated and vetted everything from end to end. And kind of my domain is quality and oversight to make sure that, once the relationship is started, that the care we're providing maintains the high bar that we value here at Wheel.
Mm-hmm. So COVID, obviously this looming pandemic, talk to us a little bit about how Wheel changed, maybe an example of how it was before and then how it's had to adapt to, a pandemic.
I think the answer is just speed, right? So COVID really confirmed a hypothesis that digital care is really the way we're heading, and pretty soon it's not going to be digital care; it's just going to be care. Like, this is going to be, the analogy we throw around in the office is, we used to call it mobile banking 20 years ago. Now it's just banking, right? So this is very similar to what we're seeing now in the healthcare landscape, and COVID basically just was like a punctuated equilibrium type event where all of a sudden, everyone was kind of forced. So I was an early adopter, but I think the remaining late adopters were forced to enter the space and start utilizing these tools. For us personally, I think what we saw, aside from the confirmation hypothesis, was just really just a ramp up of client interest, as you can imagine. But more importantly, I think we had just a ton of clinicians. I mean, we went, 10x growth just on the clinician side, and as a result of COVID, which was really kind of a twofold thing. And honestly, I'm so honored to be working shoulder to shoulder with these people, because, the outpour of interest from clinicians to say, hey, what can I do to help? How can I get involved? Especially in the early days when there's a lot more uncertainty, and really, everyone was a little bit nervous and on edge. Clinicians were just kind of, really stepping up to the plate. And I people in my ICU have heard me say this: when the building's on fire, either you're running out or you're running in. And these people were all running in. They were all eager to help. They were all eager to be on the front lines. I think about other ways that that COVID has impacted healthcare in general, and for us here at Wheel, is when I think about the behavioral health crisis that this has created, right? I mean, the numbers are staggering when you think about depression, anxiety, suicide attempts. I mean, it's really, it's heartbreaking, frankly. And behavioral health in particular has always been a very high friction experience for patients. It's very difficult to get into to first of all, to find providers, to get into them, and managing the insurance process. So one of the things that we've done here at Wheel is now we've launched a behavioral health network, and to serve exactly that population. And we've seen, again, the private sector is responding, right? So we've seen a ton of behavioral health startups and companies that are already in existence, shifting over and pivoting into behavioral health, because there's just this dramatic need. So we're standing up to meet that need, both by building the network, and one of the other products that we offer is our virtual care platform, right? So a lot of these companies, as I mentioned, we're the guys who provide the shovels. One of those shovels is the platform, right? So when we have our encounter, that encounter has to live someplace, to make it free flowing for the information to pass back and forth, for it to live in a HIPAA compliant place, for the providers to then have access later on if they want to review their notes. All these things, these are the nuts and bolts that make providing telemedicine and digital health not easy for a startup, but easy for us to provide companies, again, at all different levels, or health institutions or third-party payers, a way to just immediately plug into to a market and stand up a network in all 50 states, practically overnight.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, it's great to hear how Wheel has, adapted not just over time, but to COVID specifically. So that's great to hear. Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about how you got into telehealth at the start.
Yeah, for sure. So while I was a resident, I was actually doing my MBA as well. And one of my efforts and projects at that time was really kind of establishing a teach-the-teacher model from the United States to Iraq, which is where I'm from. And we used, we leveraged the relationships that we had there with telecom providers to help use phones as points of access for care. So I started my involvement in telemedicine in 2009-ish, and really in the not-for-profit capacity. It wasn't until 2012 or so that I was doing it more domestically in the States, and doing it on the for-profit side. And that was, that's actually one of the things that, I reflect on, was, how I was trying to navigate this system, and it was very disjointed. I didn't know, where to look for opportunities. I didn't know who was good, who was not good. How could I vet these things? There wasn't really like a good, consolidated place for me to find all these things. And it was, as a result, it was a lot of trial and error, right? So I would, find some company online, or someone would mention it to me, and I would reach out to them, and I would go through this very long credentialing process. And then at the end of this long credentialing process, I may or may not have volume with these patients or with this client, and I may or may not have work, and they may fold. The company may have just shut its doors, right? So I spent all this time and effort, trying to search for this company. Eventually, found them, and now I'm going through the process of credentialing, and and then all of a sudden, it was all for nothing, right? So one of the things that when I think about with Wheel is that we've solved that problem not just for the marketplace, but we've also solved it for providers, right? So we do a lot of that stuff for them. So when a provider comes to Wheel, they'll credential one time with us, and we hold their credentials and we manage it all. So they may work across several platforms, but they're only credentialing one time. And in terms of having to do the vetting and the heavy lifting, we do that. And we don't just do it from a clinical standpoint, we also do it from an operational standpoint. Some of the horror stories that were here from years earlier weren't so much clinical. Some of them were actually what the companies did with patient data, whether they were HIPAA compliant, whether they had irregular billing practices, all that stuff. Like as a single provider, I'm not sure I would have the ability to vet that 5-6 years ago, or even now for that matter. So one of that to me is one of the great things that we offer, our clinical network, which we've got 10,000 providers across all 50 states. So I take it very personally that we're the defenders of these clinicians and their licenses, to make sure that we can provide them a good ecosystem that they can work in, right? So, and we hear these amazing stories about providers who they may have been laid off as a result of COVID, right? And they're looking for new ways to support their families, or they have a job and they're trying to revamp their life a little bit to make sure that they can have time for their family, can have time for their personal interests, or just make a better match for their own health. And the fact that we can provide that for them and make it in a safe way is really, again, I think we have the privilege of being able to serve these guys. So it's a great system.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So did you find that COVID made it almost easier, I guess, to apply, like use services through Wheel, or did COVID hinder it in any way? I know it said that you said it really grew your business, but kind of talk to us about what actually helped you apply services faster because of COVID.
So I think it's just the rapid adoption, right? So you had health systems, which healthcare in general is traditionally it's a slow mover, right? Long sales cycles, slow to adopt new practices, and this is within the actual medical practice and also the system level. So COVID essentially forced everyone to figure out new ways rapidly to reach their patients and continue providing care. So we're uniquely positioned to allow companies, startups, scale, enterprise, whatever, to do that. So for us, it really just opened the funnel, and again, it confirmed what we believe was the case, and I think it demonstrated to a lot of companies and a lot of patients and providers, for that matter, like the kind of late adopters, that this was not just in many cases equivalent, but in many cases it was actually better than the traditional brick and mortar encounter, because we're augmenting these experiences with protocolized care, remote patient monitoring, and all the tools within the digital health ecosystem were then applied to these encounters.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I guess then, as a director and also just as a medical officer, tell us a little bit about how telehealth responded to COVID in general. Where did it take telehealth, and where is it going? What's the future of it?
So, I think in some regards, there is, I look at COVID as this huge event, and life was pre-COVID and post-COVID, right? And in general, we look at and reflect upon it as a thing that was kind of a catalyst within the digital health world. It also, though, invited players into the space that weren't necessarily clinically driven, right? So some of these companies were, they saw an opportunity and they wanted to kind of, capitalize on that opportunity. And it's our job at Wheel to vet these companies to make sure that they're really having a North Star of, the patient, right? And that's got to be what drives them. And we vet the process, as I mentioned earlier, we vet the process end to end from the patient journey and the provider journey. So I think what COVID did in telehealth was it really kind of invited a lot of players into the space. Not all of them are still here because I don't think they're, again, if you're not using the patient as your North Star, then I think that you're not going to be in the space for much longer. And part of our role is to really kind of protect our clinicians for that reason. So, I can relate to you several stories, and there's obviously they're very public stories, so I'm sure you've heard of them, of companies that weren't adhering to, they weren't doing everything above board. Let's say that, and as a result, first of all, they're bankrupt. They've been under investigation from the DOJ, what have you. But the clinicians are the ones who get left carrying the bag. When this is all said and done, the state medical boards, they don't have jurisdiction over these companies, but they do have jurisdiction over the clinicians, which is why we go to such lengths to make sure that the companies with whom we partner and that we power are truly focused on patient outcomes, so that everything is everything's above board, everything is highly defensible, and we can feel good about it as if the patient was one of our loved ones.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, definitely. So were you impressed or even disappointed with how fast telehealth adapted to COVID? Because we've seen, basically every health system and most businesses worldwide have had to really go virtual. So do you think that telehealth adapted, super quickly, and that a lot of health systems or even just Wheel in general applied that as fast as they could? Was there anything negative maybe that COVID brought to telehealth that impacted it in a bad way?
Yeah, I think the negative things are the ones I just mentioned, right? So, it attracted many players into the space. So to the extent that, you have a vetting process, I think it's a surmountable issue. For in terms of the speed with which telehealth has been embraced, I think that's for healthcare terms, this is like incredibly fast, right? So we are a notoriously slow-moving industry. So the rapid pace with which we adopted telehealth as an entire sector over the past 12 months, I think has been phenomenal. And I think that's one of the value props of when you work with a company like Wheel. There are exceptionally high barriers to entry to get into the healthcare space in general, let alone digital health, right? There's regulatory, there's staffing issues. There really is a tremendous amount of expertise that's needed and capital to launch a venture into the digital health world to reach patients via telehealth. So one of the amazing things about Wheel is that what we've done is we've managed to lower that barrier of entry to every innovator in the space, right? So these companies that are coming in, startups who have an idea on how to expand access in a particular treatment area or a particular geography, they have the ability now to do that because we've lowered that barrier to entry. So now, we don't have to, again, the analogy of us, being the guys selling shovels, we don't have to be the ones digging for gold. We can help others do that, and they can do great things. So that's really one of the great things about the model with Wheel, is that we help facilitate other great innovators to impact care in meaningful ways.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So like you said, the adoption of telehealth has been really fast because of COVID. So just in general, in your professional opinion, where does telehealth need to go or evolve to better serve patients and clinicians overall?
So, when I think about digital health and the ecosystem, I often refer to the three-legged stool, right? So the stool is it's supported by three legs. One of them is the providers and the kind of the direct interaction that happens between the doctors, the NPs. The second is the therapeutics, right? Whether that's a medication or whether that's a medical device. And the third is the diagnostics, for example, laboratory or imaging or remote patient monitoring. So I think the ecosystem will thrive when all three of those pieces of those legs are all standing strongly and together, right? Mm-hmm. If you only have one or two of those legs, the stool won't stand, right? So then you're just kind of that's more like telemedicine, 1.0, right? So I think the future state is looking at how we integrate those three legs of the stool in a more cohesive fashion, more seamless fashion. That's just, the more we can do that, the less friction for the patient, and the better the care can be.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that to make those adoptions happen, should it be more that IT and technology itself need to develop so that it's a little easier to access, a little easier to use? Or is it more, maybe just in your opinion, is it more like fee-for-service versus value-based care? Because there's something specific that needs to happen to move telehealth in general forward?
I mean, it's all of the above, right? And that's the exciting thing about this space, is that there's a lot of work to do. Again, models like ours where we can limit the barrier to entry. So great thinkers who are coming from an IT background or other areas that are non-healthcare specific can introduce their ideas and their backgrounds and perspectives and really push us forward as an entire sector. One of the exciting things I brag about often within our company is that we have relatively few healthcare veterans within our company, and we have a lot of fresh thinkers from other marketplaces, from other sectors altogether. They come with very fresh ideas, and it's really encouraging. It's invigorating, actually.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I guess in general, can telehealth continue to adapt at the rate at which it's been going? Do you think it's going to slow down?
I think we saw a spike very early on, and then with a little bit of a pullback, which was, I think, to be expected. I certainly think that we're going to start to see it re-expand now. So we've opened the door. We're not going to go back inside. It's not going to happen. Now we're seeing different use cases, utilizing better technologies for remote patient monitoring, pairing that with direct oversight with providers. And this is better for providers also, right? So now, one of the big complaints that if you ask any of our colleagues in the traditional medical community, we're talking about the fact that I don't have the pure patient relationship that I envisioned when I was a medical student, right? I wanted to be there, having this like direct relationship with my patient. And now I've got all these bureaucratic and logistic barriers that exist between me and my patient. So it's not as enriching experience as it used to be. So, I think there are two main drivers here, right? One is that this is going to be very, life-changing for a lot of patients, right? Now all of a sudden they're going to have access that they didn't have before. Frankly, there's, healthcare system is very high friction. I mean, me as a patient, you would assume that, I should have like some leg up in navigating the system as a doc. I don't. I'm clueless when it comes to like getting my care in a traditional fashion. It's very tough. And I think I have a decent shot at it, and then I'm still having a hard time. So when I think about like the lay person, it must be incredibly tough, right? So it's gonna be very tough to put the genie back in the bottle when it comes to that, because we've done such great things in terms of improving access for patients. But we've also made the experience so much better for doctors and for nurse practitioners and PAs and physical therapists, that they can now have new modalities to impact the care of their patients, to connect with them in more meaningful ways. So, it's kind of paradoxical, right? You're thinking, well, it's virtual care. I'm not in the room with that person. And it's there's a physical distance, and that gap can cause like an impairment to the relationship. It's actually quite the opposite. The reality is I have more data on my patient, and they can reach out to me at any time. There's a comfort in knowing that, whether it's a, asynchronous chat or some type of modality, they can always reach out to us. And there's a lot of comfort that's conveyed to the patients in that. And frankly, it's conveyed to me as a doc, right? I feel good knowing that my patients can reach out to me if they ever need me, can upload data that I need, to monitor their care, that I can remotely monitor them. So it gives me as a provider a lot of comfort, and it's kind of matching my lifestyle, right? So I think for those two reasons, like what we've done for revolutionizing the way we deliver care and how we've revolutionized access, I don't think we're ever going to go back. And I think it's going to continue to grow and grow and grow. I think frankly, it's just going to get better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So I guess kind of one of my last questions really is, either as a director or medical officer, or even as a practicing physician, what is the biggest thing that you've learned throughout COVID? And that can be telehealth, that can be just change over time. What's been the biggest thing you've learned, or the biggest thing that's impacted you?
I would say two things. Again, just from being on the front lines and being in the hospital setting, and also again having these reach outs from clinicians, especially the ones early on. It's just a reminder that the people going to healthcare are doing it not for themselves, not for money, certainly not that, because you're accumulating tons of debt. They're doing it because they care about people, and it's the most refreshing thing, right? And I think if that's where your motivation is, you're going to do great things. That's number one. Number two is this whole experience was a reminder that necessity is the mother of innovation, right? So we've seen great people do amazing things and come up with really ingenious ideas and new, refreshing ways to approach patient care. Then again, I don't think we're going to put the genie back in the bottle. It's gonna go further and further. So now that we see that there are, better and new and different ways to deliver care, I think that we're in for really interesting times in healthcare ahead as we evolve and we iterate on the systems that are currently in place. I think we're going to have an overall net improvement on healthcare for our patients overall, and so that's probably the kind of the two takeaways from the past 12 months.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for being the first.
Likewise. Look, you've got the hard job now. Now you have to, have it all together and make me look smart, okay?
Oh yeah, no, it's okay. It was great. It was perfect. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Great to talk to you.